好啦，各位記者朋友，差唔多。
Reporters, I think it's about time. Let's start the press conference. This is a press conference on the budget. We have the Financial Secretary, Mr. Paul Chen, and Mr. Raphael Hu, Undersecretary for Financial Secretary. We have Ms. Kathy Chu, PAS, and one more official, the government economist. Good afternoon, everyone. I delivered my budget this morning at LegCo. This was the first budget of this government. First of all, I would like to give you some background information on the economy. As you all know that the economy last year was not performing well. For the whole year, GDP dropped by about 3.5%. The three drive of our economy, that is a fixed investment, export, as well as fixed capital, they were not doing well. So because of the closing of the border, there was a time when land transport between Hong Kong and the mainland was dampened. But because of a poor economy and poor performance in the property and stock market, we have seen a drop in fixed investment. In terms of consumption, it was a small drop by about 1%. As a result of some anti-cyclical measures and the consumption voucher, consumption picked up. Last year, inflation was about 1.7%. There were some corrections in the equity and property market. We think that the economy will perform better than last year. On one hand, we have the opening of the border with the mainland. It will be much easier for visitors to come to Hong Kong, which in turn will drive our services export. And this will also help with our consumption. Last year, because of the epidemic, there was a slow growth in the mainland economy. We think that the pace will pick up this year. For the external environment, there are challenges, but we're still in the midst of an interest hike. On top of that, we see major economies tightening their fiscal measures. On top of that, there is the geopolitical tension. We have to tread very carefully. In 2023, we think that the GDP growth will be about 3.5 to 5.5%. For inflation rate this year, it will be slightly higher than that of last year. That is a result of a revival of economic activity. There will be an increased demand driving up prices. That is the economic background. When we prepare the budget, there is one more thing that we need to consider. In 2022-23, that is the end of the fiscal year, we think that the deficit stood at $139.8 billion. In last year's budget, we made a forecast of about $50 billion. There is a marked difference because of three reasons. First, after last year's budget had been delivered, there was the employment support scheme, which cost about $40 billion. Because of poor performance in the property market, for land premium, there was a drop about $40 billion. For stock stamp duty, because of the poor performance in the equity market, there was another drop by about $40 billion. That is why, at the end of the fiscal year 2022 and 23, we experienced a huge deficit. This went through our minds when we prepared for the budget because of revival of general economic activity and the opening of the border with the mainland. There are still a lot of uncertainties because we're at an initial stage. At the same time, there are challenges in the external environment. We want to have economic revival at a steady but increasing pace. In the medium and long run, of course, we have to invest in the future. This is for the benefit of better economic development. In the short run, we will organize more mega events to enhance the image of Hong Kong to attract visitors. In the past few years, because of the epidemic, we have had much fewer visitors from outside of Hong Kong. So we need more events to attract visitors. If we have exhibitions, conventions, mega events attracting big spenders, that will be a huge help to our economy. If we are to consolidate our economic revival, we need to provide support to SMEs. This can be done in 3 areas. Regular supporting measures, say a reduction in rates and reduction in profits tax. That is something also present in this budget, but the magnitude is smaller because we estimate economic revival, and we have to bear in mind prudent fiscal philosophy. So the amount of these reductions have reduced. On the other hand, we have to provide funding for SMEs. As a result, for the SME financing scheme, we extended to March 2024 so that it will be easier for them to secure financing. In this current environment, we are aware that transport operators, cross-boundary transport operators, and travel agencies would need time to recover. So we have a 100% guarantee scheme. That is a financing scheme to enable them to take out loans. For individuals, we have tax refund, we have rates refund. Because of another year of deficit, we have reduced the magnitude of these reductions. I ask for your understanding. For CSSA recipients, we give them an extra half-month allowance. We've decided to have another year of a consumption voucher. Eligible Hong Kong permanent residents will receive $5,000 in 2 installments. The first one will be disbursed in about April. That will be $3,000. For the remaining $2,000, it will be disbursed in the middle of the year. We want to make sure that the consumption vouchers will reach members of the public as quickly as possible, so we will disperse the first installment using registration details made last year. But if you've lost your card, say the Octopus card, you can apply to make changes. Unless there is a need to change your registration details, don't do it. We'll also talk about the 8 centers and development in the future. I'm not going to repeat them here. What I'd like to mention is something to do with digital economy. There will be Web3. We will promote the development of Web3. We've also mentioned about International Green Tech and Green Fi Center. So we have devoted some coverage on our efforts to promote in these two areas. In relation to our financial position in 2023-24, we will continue to issue bonds about $65 billion. Counting that, there will still be about $50 billion deficit. Our plan in the coming few years is that there will be about a $65 billion government bond being issued. That is to fund infrastructure so that they will be implemented as soon as possible to benefit the general public. In the coming 5 years, on average, every year, we spend about $100 billion on capital works. So we need to issue bonds to finance these projects. Apart from green bond, we will introduce an infrastructure bond scheme. We will make proposals to the LegCo to ask for funding, and you will get more details at that time. We hope that we will allocate a larger portion of these bonds to the general public so that there will be an extra option of secure investment. For silver bond, we will continue to make another issuance for about $50 billion for those who are aged above 60. We think that inflation is 1.7%. Next year will be about 2.5%. Very often, banks will offer an interest rate that is higher than that. So at this stage, the response for inflation-linked bonds will not be that popular. So we will put that on hold. We reckon that there will be a GDP growth about 3.5 to 5.5% for 2023 to 24, and then afterwards we think there will be a 3.7% GDP growth in the 4 years afterwards, which is higher than what we have forecast before. For our physical reserve in 2027-28, it will remain at about $980 billion, which is about 14 months of government expenditure. As at the end of March 2022, our loan ratio, that is for unpaid loan to GDP, is about 4%. And in 2027-28, it will be lower than 10%. That is safe and sound. So that's all for my opening remark. I'll be happy to answer questions. So now the floor is open for questions. May I remind reporters that before you ask questions, identify your media outlet. Let's start from over this side. Second last row on the left, the gentleman in blue. I'm from Phoenix TV. Financial Secretary, first, in the past few years, for PRH tenants, there is payment for 1 month rent on their behalf. Why is it absent this year? How come there is a 50% reduction in amount of consumption voucher? Just now, the FS said that there will be 2 installments. First, 3,000 dispensed in April. For the remaining 2,000, details will be announced later. Well, we have the Top Talent Pass scheme with a lot of entrants. Does it mean that they will be eligible? Because one of the criteria is that new arrivals will be able to get the consumption voucher. So what about those who come under the Top Talent Pass scheme? And for this scheme, people criticize it for having a lot of gray area. Sorry, could you please be succinct? And let me remind reporters, you can ask a maximum of 3 questions. So will there be a review of the cases under the scheme to see if they come to Hong Kong for another reason? Thank you. Payment of PRH rental for 1 month, it actually has stopped for quite some time. It wasn't there last year. There are diverse views in the community towards this measure. Some people think that being a public housing tenant is a beneficiary of public resources. There are still other groups of people who are in a bigger plight, say those living in subdivided units. If we are to choose because of limited resources, we have chosen not to pay 1 month rent for PRH tenants. We did not do it last year either. Regarding the consumption voucher, you understand that our intention of launching consumption vouchers was to do something to help with the poor economic performance. We wanted to give money back to the general public so that they will spend to prop up the economy. I told you that there was a drop of 3.5% in our GDP last year. For consumption, there was only a slight drop by 1%. Export dropped by about over 10%, or for fixed investment over 10%. We have SME financing scheme to support SMEs. We want to enable them to continue to operate so that jobs can be preserved. That's our policy intent. This time, we have actually deliberated for quite a long time whether to continue with consumption voucher given its different views. We see signs of economic revival. It's quite obvious in the F&B industry, but not so in the retail sector. And that is even worse for those in the export sector. We want to consolidate the economic revival, so we've decided that there can be another year of consumption voucher, albeit of a smaller magnitude. The other factor we have to consider is the financial commitment. It's about 100 billion. Even with bond issuance, that will be another $50 billion. So we have to be cautious with our spending. Eligibility is the same as that of last year for permanent resident. They cover permanent residents living anywhere, and they will get the whole amount. For other eligible persons, it's only half the amount. We will announce details later.
Next question, please. The lady in beige in the back. Good afternoon. I'm from CCTV. The budget delivered by the Financial Secretary today is the first budget delivered by this term of the government. Now, it charts the policy direction of the government. So how will it help to address people's livelihood concern? Thank you. The theme of this budget is to leap forward steadily and bolster prosperity under one new vision together. In this budget, you can see our focus on boosting the economy. We focus on fulfilling our positions under the 8 international centers, under the innovation and technology area. We will create the microelectronic center in the River Loop area. And also, we will establish a supercomputing center, and we are planning to build the second advanced manufacturing center. So you can say that we are putting a lot of focus on improving and boosting the economy. At the same time, we understand that we are still at the initial stage after resumption to normalcy and revival, and the SMEs are still under a lot of stress. So we are also offering a number of supporting measures for SMEs. We have taken into consideration our fiscal affordability and also our path to recovery. In the short run, we want to consolidate the revival momentum to support SMEs and encourage them to contribute to the economy. Thank you. Next question, please. The lady in white. Good afternoon. I'm from ... News. I have 3 questions. First, about Northern Metropolis, the steering committee or the steering office. Now, is there room to further hasten the development of Northern Metropolis? According to the government's internal estimation, when will we see initial developments in the Northern Metropolis? Now, according to media reports, there will be a new investments program for mainland residents. That is the Capital Investments Entrance Scheme. Now, the threshold would be $10 million. And also, applicants must reside in Hong Kong for 7 years before they can get permanent residency. So is this requirements, will this requirements be put in place? Now, about increasing the tobacco duty fee, are you worried that it would put extra burden on grassroots smokers? And are you worried that they may switch over to electronic cigarettes or buying illicit cigarettes and make the black markets more rampant? Thank you. I would invite the Secretary to talk about the investment program. Now, about the Capital Investment Entrance Scheme. This is not a new measure, but we have suspended the scheme in year 2015. Now, for the next step, we are considering the specifics of the scheme. There are several considerations. First, the investment threshold. The investment threshold has doubled compared with the previous scheme. Now, the budget has stated clearly that property investment would be excluded. Eligible scope include financial assets which are related to the long-term development of Hong Kong. So we are considering these factors. Now, about the eligibility of the applicants, we are also considering that. When we have more details, we will make an announcement. About Northern Metropolis, the coordination office of Northern Metropolis Development. It is under the Development Bureau. The Northern Metropolis is a vast area, equivalent to 1/3 of the entire territory of Hong Kong. Now, we have the Kwu Tung North New Development Area in Northeastern District. To the west, we have Hung Shui Kiu, Ha Tsuen, and other NDAs. A major focus in the Northern Metropolis is an industry base, particularly INT industry base. Now, the Santine Technopole will be our flagship program. In the Lok Ma Chau Loop area, construction projects are being taken forward. By the end of year 2024, some facilities and buildings will be completed. So the entire program is a fluid one. We are continuously improving it. We've also considered the cross-boundary transportation links. Since the location is very near Shenzhen, maybe there can be complementary industry development projects together with Shenzhen. So the project is ongoing. On tobacco duty, we are increasing the duty free by 60 cents for each stick, so it is some 30% increase. We have considered the impact of such an increase on grassroots people. It has been quite a while since we last raised the duty fee. You have to consider the factor of inflation and also the effect of deterring or encouraging people to quit smoking has reduced, so we want to raise it by 30%. The lady over there. The gentleman, rather.
From the South China Morning Post.
Sure.
Firstly, we wanted to ask the government about its response towards the jockey club's response towards the increase in the betting duty, affecting its charity work. And then also, we want to ask if the government will review the betting duty in the long term and also perhaps the licensing conditions as well. The second question is, we wanted to ask what is the government's plan to increase its revenue going forwards and also its plans to lower the deficits. Are there any specific measures that the government's considering or will plan to roll out? And also, we wanted to ask more on why did the government settle on the $5,000 consumption voucher amount, and any response on the view that the consumption vouchers will only lead to an increase in short-term consumption and not any long-term boost to the economy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, you know, the betting duty on football. Our proposal is to collect $2.4 billion from the Jockey Club from the next 5 years. This is a lump sum special tax. In arriving at this amount, we take into consideration a number of different factors, including the competitiveness of the betting industry of Hong Kong. We specifically asked, as I mentioned in the budget, the Jockey Club should not reduce its commitment, in other words, the donations to the charitable organizations. They should keep it at that level or even, if possible, enhance it. By collecting this fixed sum from them for 5 years, we will be able to look at more closely the competitive environment that we are facing. At the end of the day, football betting is not just something unique to Hong Kong. People can do it online. People can do it through the casinos, say, for example, in the neighboring cities. So this area, the competitive environment is fast changing. We would prefer to impose a fixed lump sum for a couple of years to allow us the opportunity to look at this more closely, to decide on the next step. As to the increase in revenue, well, this year we have taken a very serious hard look at the increase of salaries tax or profits tax, but eventually we decided not to do it. It is because over the past few years, I mean, people in Hong Kong and the SMEs have been suffering, and we want to give people more room, more breathing space, more opportunity for people to repair their own balance sheet. So this has not been undertaken. As to the other taxes, I think the community need to have an informed debate so that consensus could be built. We would not rule out that opportunity in the future, but for this year, we don't think it is the right time to do it, particularly considering the current term of government is trying very hard to attract strategic businesses to come to Hong Kong, to attract talents to come to Hong Kong. So from a policy objective, we should also avoid at this juncture any policy that it would be contradictory to the objective of attracting business and talents to Hong Kong. Finally, on consumption voucher, we are in the process of recovery, although at the initial stage, we we are concerned that this recovery could be fragile given the external situation. We need to consolidate it, and we also take into consideration that at the moment some of our citizens are still suffering a lot of financial stress. So perhaps we should also give a little helping hand. Taking into consideration of our fiscal situation, we decided $5,000 perhaps is the best we can do. Thank you.
好，下一條提問喺
Next question. On the far side, in the middle, the lady in light grey. I'm from RTHK. I have some questions. First, I know you have answered a question about the football betting duty. Well, we're talking about an annual amount of $2.4 billion. How was it set? What was your reference? Can you answer in Cantonese? Why did you choose a fixed sum instead of increasing the rates? Well, in relation to increasing taxes, there was a strong opinion. How come you started with the Hong Kong Jockey Club? Have you talked to them? Was there no need to talk to them? In relation to increasing revenue and reducing cost, how come that for the salaries tax allowance, now it has been reduced by $4,000. It was only 6,000, not 10,000, but people asked for 20,000. In relation to ad valorem tax, how come that you have adopted a similar approach to widen the value band? And why was the change from 2 million to 3 million? Are you concerned that it will cause a volatility in the property market? Regarding the football betting duty, this is what we have considered. We have to consider the overall competitiveness of the sector. You can place bets online. You can use casinos in the nearby area. So there is keen competition in football betting. When we decided to set at $2.4 billion, is an increase by over 50%. It's a fixed amount so that we will have time to monitor the competitiveness of the environment before we map out the next step. Well, the tax rate is over 60%. We also look at the fiscal reserve of the Hong Kong Jockey Club. In addition, we also look at the amount of donations they have made or the amount spent on charity that has been spent. We told them that they should not reduce the amount spent on charity. So they need to consider how to absorb the $2.4 billion betting duty. In addition, it's for them to decide whether to make use of their reserve or to cut costs. For relief measures, these are the goodies. Well, we need to consider our fiscal position. In 2022-23, we have a deficit of $139.8 billion. Next year, there will be a deficit of about $50 billion. And that's a result of bond issuance of $65 billion. We have to take into account what we have. So we have scaled back on relief measures. I first took office in January 2017. I recall that these were the good years. At the beginning, we had about $100 billion in surplus. It was quite high in level. So we wanted to share the wealth, so we gave out more. But in the last 2 or 3 years, we are aware of the economic difficulties, so we would like to not be too hard. So we have dialed it back from 20,000 to 10,000 and now to 6,000. Well, actually, this figure was adopted by previous governments. Given our current physical position, we do as best as we can. Well, we have received more in salaries tax as a revenue. That is a revenue that we are able to keep at more or less the same level. Regarding domestic property purchase ad valorem duty, and this is my consideration, we are now making changes to Scale 2. So what are the applicable properties? Those that are not bought for investment or not bought by overseas buyers, because if it's an overseas buyer, they have to pay overseas buyers stamp duty, and there is also the new additional stamp duty. So these are not the buyers we have included. For rates at Scale 2, we're talking about people who are buying a domestic property for the first time. Last year, the transaction volume comprises 90% of first-time buyers, and most of the flats are small to medium sizes. I have checked their prices, and when they want to trade up after your child is born, then you would buy a bigger flat. It's been a while since we have revised this scale, so we've decided to do it this time. For people who are buying for their own use, this will be actually an alleviation of the pressure. Some may see a reduction of $30,000, some $40,000, so they can maybe buy another piece of furniture. The impact on the property market, I think, is minimal. If you ask whether it will cause speculative activities, for those activities, if the flat is sold within 3 years, you'll have to pay the special stamp duty at a very high rate. We have seen a number of corrections in the property market. These have stabilized the market. We think it is a right time to make these adjustments. Next question. Over this side, the lady in the middle. I'm from Singtao. Just now, the FS mentioned a number of times that if we exclude bond issuance, the deficit will be bigger. For medium-term forecast, we have a reserve of about 800 billion, excluding bond is 750 billion. In 2024, there is a surplus, but if we take away repayment as well as bond issuance, there is still a deficit. So is it just a juggling of the figures to give a false impression? Well, you still rely on loan to pay for your ways. You said that for F&B there is a revival, but that is not the case for the retail sector. Well, for GDP forecast is about 3.3 for 5.5%. So is it too optimistic? Because you will not be able to reach this target given the external environment. There is a low birth rate. A lot of people say that apart from increasing the child allowance to encourage people to give birth, there aren't many other measures. What do you say to that? I'll first ask the government economist to give you some information about the economic forecast. I think you agree that there will be an economic recovery. The difference is at the pace. We see that this year there will be a lot more visitors coming back because of our publicity campaign. On top of that, there will be more business travelers coming to Hong Kong. The general atmosphere improves, which then boosts domestic consumption, and this benefits a fixed asset investment. In terms of export of goods, we still face challenges. After considering all these factors, we think that 3.5 to 5.5% is not on the optimistic side. It is it's neutral. For our physical reserve, as I said, that for unpaid loan is about 4.5% of our GDP. With bond issuance for 2027-28, it will account for about 9% of our GDP. There is a place where they're always compared with Hong Kong. The loan ratio is 130%. So our current loan percentage is rather safe. We have to invest for the future. We also have to take forward a number of infrastructure and transportation projects. We have to make good use of the funds in the market. We don't have to always dip into our own pockets. If we carry out a bond issuance program in a clear and systematic way, and if we let the general public know about what we think and the justifications we have, this will greatly help the market understand our economic situation and the purpose of bond issuance. As you know that in the past 2 years we've spent a lot on anti-epidemic measures. This year the expenditure is about 25% of our GDP. In the coming year, we will try to increase revenue sources and at the same time to reduce our cost. For this year and next year, there will be zero increase in the civil service establishment. We try to compress expenditure. As you can see that it's decreasing from 28% to 25% of our GDP. The expenditure in 27 and 28, it will be about 24%. What is important is how our public finance is bolstered to face challenges at different time range. Population and policies to encourage birth is a major issue. We just try to take a small step forward in the budget by increasing child allowance. We will look into it. I think that tax concessionary measures are quite effective.
Next question, please. The lady in the middle at the back in grey. Thank you. I'm from Shenzhen Satellite TV. Today, the mayor of Shenzhen is paying a visit to Hong Kong, and tomorrow the CE will visit Shenzhen. So the schedule is quite packed. In this budget, there is a chapter dedicated to facilitating high-quality growth. So what will be the interplay between Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and other GBA cities? Thank you. To steer economic growth towards the high-quality direction, there are several aspects. First, application of innovation and technology, especially developments of a digitalized economy. developments in digitalized economy will be a key competition area between different economies. This will define who is the winner and who is the loser. So we will have to promote developments in this regard by enhancing our infrastructure and enriching our talent pool. We have our strength in that we are an international financial center. However, there are still insufficiencies. For example, a less diversified economic structure. Now, for the financial services industry, it accounts for 20 to 33% of our GDP. However, it only hires some 7% of our labor force. So if we want to tap more opportunities, we have to diversify beyond financial services. And one area is innovation technology. We have strength in this regard. We have strong R&D capacity in universities. We can make breakthroughs from out of the scratch. For further breakthroughs, we have to commercialize R&D outcomes so that they can transition into products and services for the market. This is how we can maximize the benefit. Now, for our neighboring city, Shenzhen, there are several leading enterprises in the industry based in Shenzhen, and it has a very comprehensive production chain. Near Shenzhen, there are Dongguan, Huizhou, and Foshan, and these are the birthplace of many leading enterprises in this field. So by complementing each other's strength, we can achieve much in this area. And also in setting the development layout, we have put a lot of focus on developing the Lok Ma Chau loop. That will become a platform for collaboration between GBA cities. The strategic enterprises and talents which we have attracted through our campaign to compete for talent will establish a presence in the River Loop area, and it will become a great boost for enhancing our I&T industry. Next question, please. The lady in the front. Good afternoon. I'm from Cable News. Now about the infrastructure bond. Is it in preparation for the Land Out Tomorrow project? So will there be a lump sum bond issuance or individual issuance? Will there be a threshold? Say, for example, bond will only be issued for projects reaching a certain amount. And also, what is the need for such an infrastructure bond? About the HK Jockey Club's respond on increasing the football betting duty. So does it mean that you are not going to review the subject in 5 years' time? Now you are halving the amount of the cash, the consumption vouchers. So, and you are spending $30 billion on that. So it is somewhere in the middle. So is that what you mean by spending within means? Thank you. In terms of the infrastructure bond, the purpose is to support necessary infrastructure. Say, for example, the 3 strategic railways and the 3 major roads. Large amounts of investments will be involved. So it is not specifically for the KYC reclamation projects. The financial arrangements, the financing option for KYC reclamation projects will be announced later on when the consultation is completed. So the infrastructure bond is not linked with the KYC reclamation projects. Well, I believe that you will know more details when we apply for funding approval from the Finance Committee. In terms of the football betting duty, for the next 5 years, we will collect $2.4 billion from the Jockey Club, and we will keep monitoring the situation. I think you have to give us room to do what we need to do. the flexibility and the initiative is with the Hong Kong SAR government. Now, in terms of setting the amount for consumption vouchers, grassroots people will be benefited by the consumption voucher scheme, just like every other citizen in Hong Kong. We want to see the effect sooner. And that's why we want to disperse the consumption voucher as soon as possible, as per the arrangements last year, to benefit grassroots people as well. Thank you. Next question, please. The gentleman in blue. I'm from Now TV. Now, about the consumption voucher scheme, it will be dispersed in 2 installments. Why? Many people want to collect it in one go. And many people think it is not sufficient to address their livelihood concerns. So why don't you simply pay out cash? And would you consider allow members of the public to use the cash vouchers directly on, say, utility charges? Now, the Hong Kong Jockey Club has responded vigorously concerning the increase in football betting duty. So why hasn't you addressed the Jockey Club's concern? Now, last year, $5.4 billion was earmarked for anti-epidemic measures. So now, since we are returning to normalcy, is there still a need to earmark this sum? Well, I think this is an often asked question, why we are issuing consumption vouchers rather than a cash payout. As I said, we want to make sure that the public is spending the money that we give out. There will be 2 installments. The first installment in April, and the second installment will be dispersed in middle of the year. The timetable is similar to the consumption voucher scheme last year. Concerning the football betting duty, well, no one would like to have a tax hike. So that is just a normal response from the Jockey Club. As mentioned in my budget, we have to increase revenue and cut expenditure. But we don't want to increase profits tax or salaries tax because we want to spare the ordinary citizen. And also we have to increase revenue anyway. So that's why we will collect $2.4 billion on football betting duty from the Jockey Club. I think this is affordable for the Jockey Club. Now, in terms of anti-epidemic measures, I will invite the Permanent Secretary and Ms. Chu to talk about it. Thank you, FS. Now, we are on the path to normalcy, and we have reviewed our expenditures on fighting the epidemic, and we think we can reduce the amount earmarked. As a result, on the budgets, you can see that we are drastically reducing the amount for that purpose. But we have still reserved sufficient funding for, say, purchasing vaccines. And we are closely monitoring the latest developments of the epidemic. When there are needs, we can flexibly allocate resources to fight the epidemic.
好啦，因為時間關係。
Last 2 questions. Over to my side in the second row, the gentleman. I'm from Guangzhou Daily. I see that in the budget there is a mention about promotion of tourism. What about the use of electronic payment? Say, for example, WeChat Pay. In terms of visitors, now the border is open. visitors coming to Hong Kong, especially those from the mainland, would the government give them any preferential treatment? Just now, the FS talked about high-value industry development in Guangzhou. Well, do you have any plans to work with Guangzhou? Because, there is a Hong Kong UST campus in Guangzhou. Well, whether it's Alipay or WeChat Pay, these electronic payments are quite prevalent in Hong Kong. 2 years ago, when we first launched the consumption voucher, a lot of people have registered to receive the payment on electronic means. We're talking about 2 million accounts, new ones, and about 100,000 new shops having registered. Regarding visitors from the mainland, it's mentioned in the budget that the Tourism Board has a number of measures, including goodies for distribution. Visitors, wherever they're from, will be received with the same enthusiasm. Well, Hong Kong's closely related to the Greater Bay Area. We mention Shenzhen a lot because it's very close to us, and there's been many areas of cooperation. We are aware that when it comes to innovation and technology, Guangzhou is doing quite well, and there is a lot of room for us to cooperate. And under the existing mechanism, we can talk about cooperation. Last question. The gentleman wearing a tie at the back. I'm from Dai Hock Sin. Well, there will be consumption voucher, 5,000. Those who come to study will be 50% of that. How do you make sure that consumption voucher is used to reinvigorate consumption? And there is, well, you set aside $14.9 billion. What is it for? For land premium, there is a drop by $48.9 billion. Some people think that is because of the conservative view of the future by developers. How to ensure that in the long term there is sufficient revenue to support development? Can you repeat your second question? In relation to light public housing first phase, you've allocated $14.9 billion. I found the information in the supplement and appendices. I'm from TMHK, U-Beat magazine. For the consumption voucher, we have drawn reference from our approach last year. New arrivals who are not yet permanent residents will be able to receive 50% of the amount. It's the time to receive is limited, and therefore specific uses. We think that this will encourage people to spend the money. Light public housing, we have earmarked the amount, but it's to be used over a period of time. After a site is identified, there will be conduct of tender exercises and some procedures before work can actually be started, but we already have the funding in place. Land premium and reduction. We see from experience that when there is a drop in property prices, then the drop in land premium will be greater. Last year, there was a drop in about 15% in the property market. So it's still quite a high level. We see that in recent months, the property market has become rather stable. We reckon that in the coming year, for land premium, we have drawn reference from the land sale program to be announced tomorrow by the Development Bureau. For government revenue, it comes from land sale, urban redevelopment projects, railway projects, because premium has to be paid, and redevelopment projects by private developers. We have included those four and other factors. Our experience tells us that, for the future land sale, it will account for about 3.7% of our GDP. We have made a slight downward adjustment. We have also looked into the sites for sale in the land sale program. We think that the Hong Kong property market, on the whole, is something that we have to handle very carefully. But at the same time, we want the market to develop in an orderly manner. Sorry, the speaker is not coming through. That's the end of the press conference. Thank you.
係咧，我諗我哋今日有記者會度。
That's the end of the press conference. Thank you.
頭先有行家問過咧。
Just now someone asked the question. I was saying that if you're a Hong Kong permanent resident, you're eligible. For Hong Kong residents who are not permanent residents, well, it depends on the cutoff date when the announcement is made.